The Finals MVP only rewards a player based on one series, but the player who wins that award isn't necessarily the reason why his team got there in the first place. The Finals MVP doesn't recognize the player's performance throughout the rest of the playoffs, and that's a shame. After all, there is the conference championship trophy at the conclusion of the conference finals. So why not give out a conference MVP award as well? What if we recognize the best player throughout the conference playoffs and awarded a player from each conference with the conference MVP award? If this was the case, players who were actually the best player throughout the majority of the playoffs, and in some instances the toughest part of the playoffs, would now be recognized with an award of their own. And that's where this video comes in. Today, the decade we're looking at is the 2000s of the Western Conference, and let me know in a comment if you agree or disagree with these choices. In the year 2000, Shaq had been named the near-unanimous MVP winner, as he was in the prime of his career, and he took that amazing regular season performance and only improved it in the West playoffs against even stronger competition. And due to this, he's the winner of the Western Conference MVP. They started by defeating the Kings in 5 games, then the Phoenix Suns in 6 games, and then they defeated the Blazers in an epic 7-game series. And Shaq was clearly the best player throughout the majority of those games, as he averaged 28.2 points, 15 rebounds, 3.4 assists, and 2.3 blocks on 54.6% shooting. As usual, nobody had an answer for Shaq in the postseason, and no one came close to his numbers either. Kobe's contribution certainly shouldn't be downplayed, as he made the game-winning shot in Game 2 against Phoenix, and then he was clearly the standout performer in deciding the 7th game against the Blazers. But when you look at the totality of the West playoffs as a whole, it was clear that Shaq was the best of the best, and that at the very least, in this first championship, this was clearly Shaq's team. In 2001, the Lakers historically dominated the West playoffs, bolstering an undefeated 11-0 record on their way to the NBA Finals. It was all Kobe and Shaq destroying the competition, as they had probably the greatest 1-2 punch a single postseason has ever seen. Kobe poured in an average of 31.6 points, 7 rebounds, 6.2 assists, and 1.6 steals on 49.2% shooting. Compare that to Shaq, who dropped 29.3 points, 15.3 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and 1.9 blocks on 54.7% shooting. Having watched those playoffs closely, and looking at the production next to each other, it's really difficult to make the choice, as you're basically just splitting hairs. But for me, Kobe was the winner of the 2001 West playoffs, and here's my reasoning. For one, Kobe was significantly more efficient than Shaquille O'Neal from the free throw line. I haven't often been critical of Shaq's free throw percentage in previous videos, and that's because he was so dominant in other areas that I was able to look past it. But now, in such a tight race with Kobe, those small details really matter. It wasn't just the efficiency, but Kobe was extremely aggressive that postseason and was consistently attacking the rim, creating contact and plenty of foul calls for the challenging defenders. Due to this, Kobe shot nearly as many free throws as Shaq did throughout the West playoffs, which is pretty remarkable and makes the efficiency gap stand out that much more as a result. Kobe also did a better job of protecting the basketball, as he averaged less turnovers than Shaq did, which is also surprising when you consider that guards typically average more turnovers than centers, and you would expect that to continue to be the case, especially when Kobe is averaging significantly more assists than Shaq as well. The last deciding factor was that, unlike Shaq, Kobe's best performances came against the stronger competition, which was the San Antonio Spurs in the Western Conference Finals, who had the best record in the entire NBA, and thanks to Kobe dynamically leading the way, they destroyed them as well. In 2002, the Lakers went 11-4 throughout the West, on their way to the NBA Finals, and this time, Shaq takes the award back as the best player in the West playoffs. They defeated the Blazers, Kings, and Spurs, and in those games, Shaq put up 26.4 points, 12.7 rebounds, 2.6 assists, and 2.5 blocks on 51% shooting. He continued to be the focal point of the team's offense, and despite the opposing teams knowing exactly what to expect, they still couldn't stop it. Kobe did actually slightly lead the Lakers in scoring while putting up solid all-around numbers, but his efficiency had slipped significantly from the previous season, which is a major reason why Shaq keeps a comfortable edge. Dirk Nowitzki and Tim Duncan both had solid postseasons as well, putting up numbers that may appear even more impressive than Shaq's. But both Duncan and Dirk only won 4 games in the postseason and were easily beat in the second round. So despite their apparent statistical advantage, it's not quite significant enough for me to overlook the major gap in the volume of games played. Therefore, Shaq earns the award. In 2003, the Spurs went 12-6 on their way to the NBA Finals, and with Tim Duncan leading the way, he wins the award this postseason. 2003 was all around the greatest season of Duncan's career, and the West playoffs were no exception, as he averaged 24.9 points, 14.8 rebounds, 5.3 assists, and 2.6 blocks on 54.1% shooting. Against the Suns, Lakers, and Mavericks, Duncan dominated on both sides of the basketball, while continuously finding the open shooters. Kobe and Shaq both had their usual incredibly productive postseasons, but I can't justify giving them the award since they ultimately only made it to the second round, where Duncan's fantastic play ended their season. Now on the other hand, Dirk had a strong postseason as well and made it all the way to the West Finals before losing in 6 games to the Spurs. Despite his nice numbers, Dirk was never the defensive player that Tim Duncan was, especially this postseason, and that's what gives him the edge, as he was the best two-way player in those playoffs. In 2004, the Lakers, loaded with 4 Hall of Famers, went 12-5 through the West on their way to the finals. But the best player in the West playoffs wasn't on that team, but rather it was Kevin Garnett of the Minnesota Timberwolves. In the regular season, KG put up an incredible MVP performance, and the playoffs were more of the same, as he averaged 24.3 points, 14.6 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 1.3 steals, and 2.3 blocks on 45.2% shooting. He was doing everything on the court for Minnesota, as he was 3rd in the playoffs in scoring, 1st in rebounds, 13th in assists, 4th in blocks, and had the 2nd highest player efficiency rating, only outdone by Dirk Nowitzki, who only played 5 games in the first round. With his leadership, the Wolves pushed a far more talented Lakers to 6 games in the West Finals before being eliminated. Kobe and Shaq definitely had a noteworthy performance on their way to the finals, but from an all-around impact perspective, KG comfortably takes this new award in these playoffs. In 2005, the San Antonio Spurs went 12-4 on their way to the NBA Finals, but for the second straight season, the Conference MVP award was going to a player from the losing team in the conference finals, and that would be the Phoenix Suns' Amar'e Stoudemire. The 22-year-old big man was experiencing his breakout season in 2005, but his performance in the playoffs was on another level entirely. Many have already forgotten how lethal and explosive this guy was in his younger years. In the playoffs against the Grizzlies, Mavericks, and Spurs, he put up incredible numbers of 29.9 points, 10.7 rebounds, and 2 blocks on 53.9% shooting. Yes, his Suns did lose in the West Finals in 5 games to the Spurs, but that certainly wasn't his fault, as he led every single contest in that series in scoring, with averages of 37 points, 9.8 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks on 55% shooting and 61.1 true shooting percentage, which included a 41-point and 9-rebound performance in Game 1 and a 42-point and 16-rebound performance in Game 5. Duncan had his usual solid stat line throughout the West playoffs, and many of the things he provides doesn't show up on the stat sheet. But with that being said, from a production standpoint, no one was close to Amar'e in the West playoffs. In 2006, the Dallas Mavericks went 12-5 on their way to the NBA Finals, and they also had the best player in the West playoffs, who was Dirk Nowitzki. The 2006 Mavericks defeated the Grizzlies, Suns, and Spurs, and in those games, Dirk put up 28.4 points, 11.9 rebounds, 3.1 assists, and 1.2 steals on 49.4% shooting. His efficiency numbers across the board were up to his elite standards. Included in his strong playoff showing was a pivotal 5th game in the West Finals where he dropped 50 points and 12 rebounds. Honorable mentions definitely got to go to Tim Duncan and Steve Nash. Now, Duncan did all of his damage in only the first 2 rounds, so Dirk keeps his edge over him, while Nash certainly challenged him in his 3 rounds, but not enough to overlook the fact that Dirk was the victor. Kobe also gets a mention, as he was an absolute beast in the 2006 playoffs, but I don't even consider him for the award here, as he played in only 7 games of the first round. In 2007, the Spurs went 12-4 on their way to the NBA Finals, and they also had the best player in the West playoffs, who was Tim Duncan. Tim was always in the running for this award during his prime years, partially because of how his team was always winning in the postseason, but also because of how he impacted the game in so many ways and on both ends of the court. And this postseason was no exception, as he averaged 23.2 points, 11.4 rebounds, 3.1 assists, and 3.3 blocks on 53.9% shooting. The only players who challenged him this season were not the usual suspects, which included Baron Davis, who was incredible during the Warriors' We Believe run, which includes their historic upset over the 67-win Mavericks. Carlos Boozer is also in the mix, whose Jazz went to the West Finals where they were eventually eliminated by Tim Duncan's Spurs, and also Amari Stoudemire, whose Suns made it to the second round before being eliminated by the Spurs as well. Despite these great performances, Duncan comfortably takes the award. In 2008, the Lakers went 12-3 on their way to the NBA Finals, and they had the best player in the conference during those playoffs in Kobe Bryant. With the addition of Pau Gasol, Kobe finally had the help necessary to return to the finals, and he certainly didn't squander the opportunity. When people reflect on the 2008 postseason, they usually just talk about the conclusion in the NBA Finals, but the road through the West for Kobe was incredibly difficult and historic. They defeated the 50-win Nuggets in the first round, the 54-win Jazz in the second round, and the 56-win Spurs in the West Finals, and in those games, Kobe put up 31.9 points, 6.1 rebounds, 5.8 assists, and 1.3 steals on 50.9% shooting. Of the rest of the conference, Chris Paul was definitely the strongest contender against Kobe, as he put up fantastic numbers, but he did it in just 2 rounds of competition compared to Kobe's 3. Therefore, the Mamba convincingly wins the award. In 2009, the Lakers went 12-6 on their way to the NBA Finals, and once again, winning the award is Kobe Bryant. The revenge mission, the Kobe scowl, and torching Shane Battier. It was an incredibly iconic run for the Mamba through the difficult Western Conference, and he did it to the tune of 29.6 points, 5.3 rebounds, 4.3 assists, and 1.7 steals on 46.6% shooting. All of that production while also having an elite impact on the defensive end of the floor. The greatest challenger for the award was the 24-year-old Carmelo Anthony, who strongly led his Nuggets to legitimately challenge the Lakers and push them to 6 games. Specifically, the battle between Melo and Kobe was one of the great solo battles of playoff history. In the West playoffs, Carmelo averaged 27.2 points, 5.8 rebounds, 4.1 assists, and 1.8 steals on 45.3% shooting. He made it interesting, and it was certainly close. But ultimately, Kobe was the closer when the games mattered most, to go along with his small statistical advantage. Here's a quick recap of who wins the award in each season in the 2000s. Do you agree with the list? Let me know in the comments section which ones you think I got right and which ones you think I got wrong. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.